How's it going, DC fam? Today on the Do Work Love Strong podcast, I'm accompanied by Jeffery Crabb, Diamond C CEO, and my older brother. We're going to take a little trip down memory lane and look at the history of R&D or research and development at Diamond C. If you've been around or watched many videos or worked at Diamond C, you know already that R&D is part of our DNA and super, super near to our heart. So with no further ado, let's get right into it. Going back to the early times, Diamond C started in 1985. Kind of talk to us, Jeffrey, about the origin of R&D, kind of where it came from.
You said R&D's in our DNA, and quite literally. It started with our dad, Mike Crabb, who was one of the founders with our mother back in 1985. He was always resolved to build the best trailer that he possibly could. And that was in his DNA from the way his parents raised him to always do the best work they could possibly do, to not cut any corners. His dad was a builder, a home builder, contractor, and so Dad came up working with and around his dad in construction projects and things, and was just trained that way, ingrained in who he is. Don't cut any corners, do it right. Go all the way to make sure that it's a great product that's going to hold up and perform for the home buyers at that time.
Yeah.
And that definitely just translated straight through when Mom and Dad started building trailers, translated straight into his approach to designing trailers. And so in the very beginning, when they started building trailers, of course, he worked with some trailer builders and came up with their base product line, base trailers that they launched with in 1985. But then ever since then, it's been a continuous evolution. And way back in that era, and of course I wasn't there, but from the stories that Dad's told me along the way, and just from pictures and documents and kind of the historic files of Diamond C, so to speak, so much of their R&D then was accomplished just through literally him and the trailer builders of the time, thinking about, working on, talking about how can we make this better? How can it serve the customer better? How can we improve the fit, form, function, the durability, all of those things? A lot of that was accomplished through partnerships with vendors, where he worked with outside vendors that were experts in their subject matter, whether that was a paint vendor or a sheet metal vendor or whatever. Worked with vendors to develop solutions, and it was just bit by bit, constant evolution. Now we call that relentless pursuit of progress, is what the term we put on it today.
Yeah.
But it was just constant, relentless pursuit of progress, bit by bit, in trailer design evolution with the people on the team and the vendor partners, which different scale today, but is essentially still what we do today.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out is something was similar then as it is today, is doing it based on customer insights. I can remember the specific story of sway control, and in the beginning it didn't exist, and so but there was several trailers that came back and had this issue of being tweaked, and so it's kind of he would take that information back and then begin the next step of, okay, how can we make it better? Who do I need to have involved? Is it just was it something you could do with a torch, or was it a vendor? You need to get a vendor involved.
Right, exactly. So they, evolved that way through the late 80s and 90s. And in the 90s, I know that he had some drafting capability on the team. There was a person or two that knew how to draft in AutoCAD, learned how to draft in AutoCAD. And so they used that to begin documenting their designs and to begin doing sheet metal design and things like that through the 90s, leading up to really in the early 2000s is when we got out of school, when I entered the scene, started working at Diamond C. And at that point, there was no CAD drafter around then. And so the process worked still very much the same. I mean, it was me and trailer builders and vendor partners working on design developments, research and development, and what we could do to answer customer feedback, to better serve the customer, to develop the trailers, fit, form, function, durability, value, all those things. Until probably 2005 or 6, somewhere around there is where we hired the time at which we hired our first full-time CAD drafter, and which has continued to be a constant evolution of the R&D and the R&D team and engineering team since then.
Yeah, it's a valuable piece, because to be able to see what your thoughts are, on paper, somewhat validate, I say on paper, on screen, somewhat validate, your craziness to some extent.
Right, exactly.
Because a lot of the ideas that we have, may have 1,000 ideas in a year, but how many of them actually make it to production is a much smaller number. So, and that's one of the early steps is validating, getting it on screen so you can look at it.
Absolutely. I'm glad you point that out, because that's early step of validation, but that's not, in so many ways, that's not where the research and development really happens on the screen or in the computer. That's a function of all of our ideas and feedback, collective ideas and feedback of the team here, and then customer input and all those different functions coming together to figure out where do we need to invest our time in developing the future of the product, whatever it is.
It's interesting, from that point though, how things evolved, and you wish, or I think in many cases you want to look back and say, well, I knew that the next step was X. No, no, in many cases it was, it's intuition and gut and just, trying to be intentional in how we're growing and what the need is.
Right. Absolutely. It's a development. That word development is so often it's step by step by step. And, we have a vision for the final product, the end product, whether it's a treader design or a business system design or just a process for how we're going to build something. We may have a vision for what we want it to look like in the end. But especially in the cases where we've done things that really haven't been done before, it's a very iterative process in where do we think we start, take a step or two in that direction, see what we like, what we don't like, what we can do better, and then do it again and again and again and again until we uncover the way, find the way that is going to work to achieve that result and make all of the customers happy, all the stakeholders happy, which when we say research and development, that's one of the most tricky things, challenging things about it. Number one is the end customer that's going to own and use the trailer, but we have a lot more customers to satisfy in that process too, which includes the people that are building it and people that are finishing it and the sales and marketing teams and bill materials and a lot of customers to serve with the research and development. How does this fit and function and work and assemble and serve everyone? The dealers that distribute the product. Does it work for them in shipping and merchandising and distribution? There's a lot of customers involved in any development project, even the vendors. Every stakeholder has to be considered in that process. And that's when we know we've got something right and something valuable, it's this almost magical sweet spot where this satisfies all of those customers. This checks all of those boxes and doesn't sacrifice anyone. Yeah. That's always the sweet spot that we're driving for. Is how does this improve the design or how does this research and development improve the design for all of the customers involved, not just one or the other. Yeah. It's always the goal.
It's really underestimated. So often folks hear the customer, and of course, automatically they go to the end user. Mm-hmm. But internal customer is especially as your business is growing, and it could be building trailers, it could be doing anything, a bakery, you name it. But those internal customers are very important in the process.
Absolutely. You can have a beautiful product, idea, concept for development, but if it's not something that our team can produce consistently, then it's a loss. It's not good, Right. And it's the same. You said bakeries, same. I mean, the team, the people producing that have their hands on it, hands in the work, are just a critical part of that development process. How we're going to accomplish this on a routine, consistent basis and perform effectively and efficiently for the end customer and for all the other customers involved. It can get to be a pretty tangled web to sort through. Just requires, we're so fortunate and blessed to have a lot of people around, several people around that are just especially gifted and talented in processing through all those different dynamic factors for a development, because it can be, with treader design, we've had things, and you well know over the years, where as simple as like the license plate bracket, where we can go through a beautiful R&D process and come up with this amazing treader design. But what about the stinking license plate bracket? Where does it go? How are we going to handle that? and we forgot to or skipped a step, or I got ahead of myself, and we didn't consider that customer on the line that has to install that bracket. And so they're, the first one goes through production and they're standing on their head to tighten the bolts and get the thing. Not a good customer experience. And that's some of the lessons we've learned over the years, and being so careful and considerate of all the customers involved in all of these R&D projects, is to make sure that the final product is something that fuels the growth and success of everyone involved, not just one or the other.
Yeah. Not just production, not just the end customer.
Right.
What do you feel like in growing businesses, say when we're talking about kind of years past and even present to some extent, but is one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're wanting to do R&D and grow and evolve? I mean, we probably could list if we thought about it, a million mistakes we've made.
Oh, for sure.
But
for sure. So you said one of the biggest mistakes that people make in R&D or development of a business, or research and development process. And one of the things that we've learned over the years is moving too fast and not being careful to consider all of the stakeholders, which is what we've just been talking about, of course. Yeah. But I know that especially early on, over the years, I made plenty of mistakes and in that, and though we may have accomplished some incredible work in the end, oftentimes the process was not very graceful, and it may have included some pretty hard pain points for one customer or another, which always ends up back on us, whether it's a team member or the final customer or who. So it's our responsibility, and anyone that's innovating, I mean, the challenge and the responsibility is to just be extremely thoughtful and careful in how this change or innovation cooperates with, feeds the growth and success of all the stakeholders involved, whoever those are. That's a really delicate balance, though. Yeah. It's a really delicate balance. It's critical to be thorough in that. But the other reality I would say that we just have to be careful to balance in that is that there's never going to be a perfect scenario in a case of innovation, true innovation, doing something for the first time in your business or in your hobby or with your product or whatever. If it's a true innovation, it's the first time that your organization or your team or yourself are entering this project or this new idea. You can never know it all. Right. You can never be perfectly prepared. Like, it doesn't exist. And so there is a point at which we have to be very careful to be considerate and thorough, but there is a point at which, a jumping off point, there is a point at which that you have to take the leap, keep the faith, dive in with relentless pursuit of progress, absolutely resolved to the mission to make it work, to working out the bugs, and to know that that there are some risks involved. Be aware of that, careful with that, but we have to jump off at some point because you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right?
Until you're in it. Yeah.
and so often when it's a brand new process or a brand new idea, we can work at preparing for that and being as thorough in collaboration as we can be. But we use the example a lot when we started powder coating trailers for the first time years ago. We had 12 or 15 people, industry experts, all gathered around this big conference table for hours and hours working through the design of this powder line and how everything was going to work and interact and how the products were going to work with the spray equipment and the spray equipment with the booths and all these different dynamics. And it got to a point, though, where it's like we have been as thorough as we can possibly be in the discussion and the planning and the concept. And we can even test spray trailers in other facilities that are similar, but we can't trial and error, test and tune this facility until it's built,
until it's going,
until it's here, until we can actually hang a trailer on the line.
Yeah.
And so there's just always that jumping off point where we have to decide. Once you've been thorough, decide, commit, and go, and just be very aware of the risks and impacts along the way, and work very quickly to improve and go through those iterations on anything that may not be quite right.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out, and it may seem very basic, but something that we still wrestle with, especially in a growing team. when you talk about making sure that key stakeholders are involved, is the point of ownership in these projects. I mean, any individual project, but we've realized, you talked about collaboration. Sure, you can have all the greatest minds around the table, but if there's not somebody to tie it all together, to make sure that you're in on it, that he's in on it, she's in on it, the right people are at the table, and that there's assigned ownership, that's where projects get really difficult.
Absolutely. The most successful projects we've ever done have had clear scope, clear definition up front, and clear project ownership. Who's managing this project along the way, bringing the right people to the table at the right time to make sure that it's moving along and we're getting answers, and any roadblocks are being discussed and cleared. And the roughest, hardest projects we've had over the years have been the exact opposite of that. We had great ideas, great intent. I probably got us in trouble by saying, let's go do this. We got to get it done.
No.
This is exciting and new and awesome. And I know customers are going to love it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And jump and run and not be as thoughtful as we needed to be in all of that scope clearing and collaboration up front, and how this impacts all customers. I'm joking about it. It's definitely some of my hardest lessons learned over the years. And the battle for me today, and I think for probably a lot of people with similar strengths, is we have to learn how to manage through that in being thorough and careful to slow down up front, to clear the scope, to think through all those impacts, but not to lose the entrepreneurial spirit and the fire of innovation.
Yeah.
And so how do we marry those two things together and become better and better at research and development and innovation, but in a higher performing, more effective and more efficient way? It's a challenging thing to do, but that's what we're talking about around here all the time right now as we build our innovation engine, we call it. We're talking about all the time. How do we absolutely keep that roaring entrepreneurial spirit, innovative spirit, but develop and scale our systems to accomplish that work more and more efficient, with more and more team members involved, and more complexity in the vendors and the size of the organization and all the different customers and stakeholders involved. It's a more complex process than it used to be, but just means that our process has to be better, and we have to be much more clear on that ownership. Just like you said, ownership and planning up front makes so much of the difference in how effective those projects are.
Yeah. When you're talking about the jumping off point, and when you're forging a path, there is no black and white, right?
That's right.
And so you get to the jumping off point, and I want to speak to this a bit to encouragement almost for viewers or listeners, what in whatever they're doing. That Craig Groeschel, the acronym GITMO, it's kind of that's one thing. Like, there is no, again, I guess I'm trying not to make too many words out of this, but it's not black and white. So, but at some point you have to move. Yeah. Like, you're not going to get it perfect. You're not going to get, if you get to 100%, you've lost potential, or you lost opportunity. Right. Yeah. So that's something we've wrestled with, because for so often, well, why didn't we just do this way the first time? And it's like, it's an evolution of things. Right. Yeah. And so it's kind of, what is it, an 80-20 rule? Gitmo is kind of, you get 80%, because once you get past there, you start, you're past the point of diminished return. Right. And so do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. It's not something that I think anyone around can write a rule for, an exact rule, because it's such so dependent on all the variables of the situation.
Well, and disclaimer, Activator loves just Gitmo, because it's like
Activator's my number one strength, so I love to just get going.
Yeah, let's get going.
Yeah, to get going.
So maybe it's like 60%.
Yeah,
instead of 80. But
I have to be careful with it. But you're exactly right. It's something that anyone innovating, trying something new. Again, every situation is so different. We just have to be really careful to think through all those impacts and decide impacts and risks, potential risks, and decide when is the risk level tolerable, what makes sense, and who owns the risk, where is the risk. We would never ever, if we perceive that it's a risk to the end customer getting the trailer, we'd never ever move on. Right. We would never ever get going. Yeah. The risk can't be with the end customer. Is there a production risk here in how well it flows down the line? Can we accept some risk there? Can we accept some risk in the efficiency of assembly? Sure, we can.
So we know there's going to be, production processes and things that
Absolutely.
are learned and get better.
Absolutely. And practice makes perfect as far as anytime we're starting new processes, the first one takes an hour, the second one takes 55 minutes, the 100th one takes 15 minutes. Just the way it goes while people are familiarizing themselves and getting used to. So identifying where the risk lies and what is acceptable risk for which stakeholder. And like it's just said, in our case, no risk is acceptable for the end customer, the trailer owner buyer, but there are a lot of other parties involved that we have to decide. I mean, is there 10% risk that may be tolerable for getting started? Is a 70% risk tolerable for getting started? No. I mean, no, we're not going to do that if it's excessive risk.
Right.
But finding that sweet spot that's right for the all risk has a price tag attached. So just deciding what risk is acceptable for moving the project forward. That's I think how we have to think about that jumping off point. Yeah. When does it make sense to push go, and activate the plan?
Yeah. And definitely as your business evolves, risk levels change.
Absolutely.
And where you jump off changes. I mean, you try and stay in tune to that, as your business changes. But the same core principle exists.
Absolutely. No question.
Yeah. So talking more in terms of today, we kind of hit back and forth, but more in terms of today and where R&D is and kind of where our heart, soul, passion is with R&D and where we're going.
Yeah. So today, I mentioned just a few minutes ago, innovation engine. That's what we've coined it around here. We are working very hard to build an innovation engine. We have a crew in engineering and R&D technology just focused on that, building this innovation engine that allows us to do research and development in a much more efficient and effective way than we ever have. We've accomplished some amazing innovations over the years, some really great things for the trailer industry, and we're only going to accelerate that. That's our mission, our ambition. It's so much of what our brand is about, is solving problems for trailer buyers, users, people that are on a mission to move things. They have things to move. And so how can we serve their needs better and help them be more effective in that process? We are relentlessly focused on building an innovation engine that allows us to do that more effectively than ever before, and in a way that is more effectively tied to our customers' needs and wants and problems, issues, opportunities than ever before. So that, we're solving problems at a more rapid pace than ever. And that, as the company has grown, that's become a much more complex department and a much more complex part of our organization. But again, that innovation engine is about identifying all the different components that have to work together and in what rhythm, just like an engine, in what rhythm do they have to work together to produce the horsepower, to launch, to produce the horsepower and drive the car forward, or the rocket ship launch or whatever. So we've got those components identified. What are all the parts and pieces of our innovation engine? How do they all tie together? And then it's a process of revving the engine right now.
Yeah.
We've identified that. We've got the pieces in place, building the team, and then it's a process of revving that engine, getting faster and faster and better at doing that work to provide solutions and to advance the product for the trailer buyer, user, owner that's out there trying to do work and feed their own families and do it the most effective way possible, and wants to invest in a piece of equipment that's going to serve their business, serve their personal interests, whatever, serve it well and hold up.
That's awesome. And what's so cool is that and I'm kind of jumping back and forth, but with all of what you just said, the core is still the same. The do work, core value, the spirit of, work smarter, not harder. All, the things, the DNA that makes up Diamond C. It may be in a bigger package and more complex, but at the core of it, it's still the same company as it was in '85.
Absolutely.
From that perspective.
Absolutely.
So, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate spending the time. I mean, just getting a little bit of dig in a little bit. Of course, I'm privy to a lot of it, but you just said some stuff that even in some parts, so I'm like, that's good. We need to talk some more about that offline. But no, it's an interesting story, and we've got an amazing team, and so obviously a lot of that, or 99% of that, the credit goes to the team throughout the years. That has been in and out, come and gone. People that are not even here anymore, that served that period of time, are a lot of the driving reason. So,
absolutely
cool.
Thank you, appreciate it. It was fun to talk about. I could go all day.
Yeah, thanks. Right. Yes, sir. See you.